folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And as I continue to traverse the musical landscape of our cultural heritage, it has been absolutely invigorating to connect with my peer group, cats like Neil Casal and Dan Horn, Farmer Dave Schur. And what I've realized is that there are these sort of pockets of regional activity going on is not only it's inspiring, and it's also authentic. Not so much the music is one thing, and then you translate it over and you realize that the people, the musicians, are even as amazing as the music themselves. And I get a chance today to speak to a decorated singer and guitar player, a guy who's done a myriad of things in his career already, and we were just listening to him in a project known as Grateful Shred. He's a guitar player, also a singer. Austin McCutchen, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
It's an honor to have you, man. My first question is, have you, when did you start writing original material in your career?
I'd say like kind of maybe like early teens. I started to kind of like fiddle around with lyrics and stuff. When maybe I was like 13 or 14, I really like kind of thought that like maybe it was something that I could do or wanted to do, and like I guess that kind of started. I kind of got into that around the time I started to get into playing guitar, and I kind of always wanted to be a guitar player, I guess, but kind of like more of like lean back on writing lyrics and stuff more than being able to shred.
No, I mean I had a chance to hang with Dan Healy in Marin County, and a few months ago we did a Facebook Live interview. He was talking about the Kingston Trio. There's one cat in that band who was obsessed with world music, and so they would incorporate world percussion. But more importantly, a lot of the songs they were singing were folk tunes. They weren't American folk tunes. They were world, European folk, the old world folk tunes. And I just wonder if you could talk to the audience about, even when you were just sort of getting going with writing, the germ of the songs, where the concepts derive from. I still to this day, I look back at. I've interviewed John Perry Barlow, rest in peace, and Robert Hunter is obviously totally an enigma of himself. But you listen to this stuff, and it's like, the component of LSD was just so righteously there, and it was so beautiful. But yet there was also a mystical and old world quality to the story, to the songwriting. And I just wanted you to take the audience through your own evolution as it related to your own poetry.
Yeah, well, I think that like sort of old world tradition thing's kind of interesting because, the whole European thing, the way like those like traditional songs and those folk songs were traded by like people who were like traveling musicians, because obviously they didn't have ways to, we have recordings and the internet and records and all that stuff now, and back then people would like travel and trade those songs, and that's kind of how it spread, was by physically being there. And my relationship through it is very different, obviously, but I sort of found folk music at in like, I guess like my early teens and stuff, and then kind of became obsessed with acoustic music and the guitar and the way melodies sort of play out in a song, and the content and the landscape of that stuff is really interesting. And like I come from the Midwest and stuff, so it kind of, folk music kind of always resonated with me. And sort of the backdrop of those sort of songs is like kind of set in sort of the country and that stuff. So I've always kind of gravitated towards that kind of style of writing and music. And
you give an example of like an early tune that you wrote that sort of encapsulates all these different areas that you're talking about.
I have a song called like "Honey Don't Be Sad" that kind of like I guess would kind of like cover a lot of that, and kind of talking about traveling and being from a place and moving to a place and feeling a certain way about it. And I would say that would probably be a good example.
How have you? Let me ask you though. Earlier in your, how old are you, by the way?
I'm 32.
Okay, so I'm you're just a young cat, man. I mean, I'm 40.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really cool. I mean, how I just want you to talk about with your own material, authentically, how you allow those tunes. So many of the cats I talked to today, they make album after album they make all these albums. I'm in the studio making an album, I'm making another album, and yet it's like, now I'm in Tucson, so it is what it is, but I don't understand how you can make all this content and then how do you let it breathe? How do you let it become its own? How do you let it grow into a real message, a song? How do you let it grow into something? And I have you been able to crack that nut? I mean, is there a way, as opposed to just relentlessly going into the studio? We used to have situations where, James Taylor, Jackson Brown, or you'd cut an album, the label would support it, you'd go on tour, and then the song would take on a life of its own because you'd be playing it live every night. How has Austin McCutchen dealt with that? Because how do you allow this stuff to breathe, man? Because I just feel like, everybody's got their home studios today, and not everybody's Dan Horn as it relates to production and engineering, but everyone's got those capacities. But then it's like, how do you transcend that? How do you move beyond that?
Well, I don't know. My thing hasn't been as much of like a sort of studio project as much as it's been kind of a live thing. I lived in New York for 5 years and started putting together bands out there, and we would get these like residencies going where we'd just play every week. And so like, I'm in the situations where I'm writing songs, I'm playing my songs, I'm learning sort of the tradition of like country music and folk is to like play other people's songs. So like, I'm putting together bands and playing a lot of like covers and stuff. I'm learning a lot of like Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson and Waylon and all that stuff. And that's kind of like I guess how I've been able to let my material breathe, is just play the songs out live, find a place to do it, put together a band, and just keep doing it.
Can you give an example of one? I mean, first of all, I just spoke to a violin player, but I mean, you're talking about you were in New York City. Can you talk about one of these residencies, where it was at, and then how that lent itself? Did it get to a point where, I'm not talking about the cover tunes, I'm just talking about your original stuff, where did it get to a point where you weren't ever playing the same song once?
But I mean, that's like a funny way to put it, but
it's a Phil Lesh line, actually. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he's like never play the same thing once.
It's still hard for me to understand that, but what I'm getting at is like, can you talk? This is just for younger cats. I mean, these were. I mean, Chuck Rainey was telling me, he's like, dude, I'd play these are more session gigs, but he's like, I'd play for free. So I'm just trying to get. I want you to just talk about one of these specific residencies where you felt like you really grew, and the songs grew, and maybe even your musical vocabulary grew.
Yeah, well, like there was this place that opened right before I moved out of New York. This like country bar in Brooklyn called Skinny Dennis, which is an homage to like Waylon's bass player from the 70s, and we were playing there every week, and like it's sort of a set crew of guys, but then there's kind of like a little bit of a rotating aspect to it where people would sit in and stuff, and like that kind of like thing keeps you on your toes, and you're just like always, like sometimes it kind of feels that way where the sort of uncertainty of like or like some sort of different vibe sort of coming into the picture like forces your music to be more like fluid. And I feel like there was a lot of experiences like that from playing hours every week, and like for me there's like a certain sort of levity or like joy that comes from doing that stuff. And so I guess sometimes I would say that like it kind of felt that way, like we were kind of like like transcending it or something like that. If that's kind of like what you mean by not playing it once, if it's like really breathing and it's like really like clicking and happening.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wondered, I missed the first part of what, did you say that there were different cats coming in every night, or was it pretty much a set band for the residencies?
It was sort of a set band, and then there would kind of be like, I felt like the added element of people like sitting in and jamming with us kind of like made this whole dynamic to where it was like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. And like,
did you, what was your, did you have a chance to do any studio work in New York, or was it all live?
No, I did some studio stuff. I worked with a guitar player, this guy Jason Laughlin, who's a like kind of a country guitar player, and we did some stuff in Brooklyn. We recorded in Philly a little bit too.
Wow. I think I know that cat actually. I mean, did the when you look back at that experience, what did you gain the most out of those residencies? To me, like that, Ahmad Jamal had a residency at Pershing Street for 6 months. He made records on Chess Cadet. What for you? How has it made you? How did it embolden you to become more yourself?
Well, I think like in these sort of bands, especially with like Grateful Shred, everyone kind of like we all kind of like fill certain roles within the projects and stuff. And I've kind of like in that situation, kind of like when like in the sort of residency style thing, just being a band leader creates this thing, this like heightened awareness of like the people around you and like organizing this stuff. And so I kind of got to a point to where I was like constantly putting these like shows together and like focused on like getting the material together, getting people in the same place, and like and I think I took away a lot of experience on that level from it. And also you just like sing every week, and you're just like cranking after a while. And I think you really get to a point to where you can like kind of just like sing your ass off, and like I don't know, I think that's kind of like what I like about it a lot, is just like it keeps you sharp and all that stuff. So
did you get off on all this having to get people to the gigs on time? I mean, that could be a burn. I mean, like, did that wind up being something that you found to be interesting because you were setting up all these different kinds of events? It just seems to me like in this day and age, musicians have to do everything themselves. Did that become a fun process for you, or because obviously the bands, most people do the stuff. They could, they do it because they are waiting for that one magical gig that might make 40 other clunkers worth it. And you're talking about a lot of collaboration and putting stuff together, which can be somewhat exhausting.
Yeah, sometimes it's exhausting. Sometimes it's like stressful and all that. But but I think for the most part I've had a lot of fun with it. It's like challenging, and it's like it's really cool to work with other musicians, and when the music feels right, and when you're kind of like doing it for the right intentions, it's like I think the payoff is like far outweighs any amount of stress that comes with it. But I
want to ask you that though, because I just was up in Phoenix with for the Billy Cobham rhythm retreat, and Kenny Barron, the piano player. I mean, he told me this in January at his house in Brooklyn, but he told me again in Mesa. He said, my intention is to touch people's hearts. What are Austin McCutchen's intentions on the bandstand?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's like the shit. It's like you want to like connect with your audience. You want to be like, or I'm saying I want to be doing that. I want people to. I want to get off on it.
Right.
I want my audience to get off on it. I want it to be like it's like we live in like a fucked up world, and so my thing is like putting together an experience for people that lets them just have release, and I feel like I do that with my country stuff and the bands I put together, and we do this kind of like groovy thing, and like lately it's kind of become this kind of like 70s like whatever, like J.J. Cale kind of thing.
Oh, I dig that stuff, man. It plugged in electric country, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that stuff people really relate to in their like soul, if you want to say that. And like I think there's a similar connection with this Dead music, with the Grateful Dead, and I've always had that connection to the Grateful Dead ever since I've like started listening to them. And so
I completely did part of the Grateful Dead's mystique. I mean, this is a fascinating. I want to read you this something that I transcribed from my third interview with Healy. I found it to be revelatory, but it also leads into this idea of what you're talking about. Because I think one of the communal things about the Grateful Dead was that none of these guys, they were all self-taught musicians, and so he says here, he said there wasn't a single non-tragic keyboard player in the Grateful Dead. He said in my opinion, it has to do with what you can do with a guitar and what you can do with a keyboard. When you're a keyboard player, you might play a diminished chord, whereas if you're a rock and roll guitar player, you might not know what a diminished chord is. There's a certain amount of frustration in the pedanticness of 1-3-5, 1-5-7, 1-4-5 chord changes, mostly in either a major chord or a minor chord, and anything beyond that was kind of over everybody's head. If you're formally trained keyboard player, then that kind of stuff you learned in the third grade. The sophistication of approach to music was really limited in the Grateful Dead. I mean, Healy's one of the most brilliant. They were all brilliant cats, and I don't think he's chewing sour grapes. To me, and this is not a reflection on you or your facility or your chops or your feel, but how much of it has to do with just sort of giving it all you got and knowing that you have limitations. I mean, it's amazing that band, the Grateful Dead, which I never saw once in my life. I've never seen I've seen a couple of different offshoots of stuff, but the amount of all I listen to what my daughter's with is early 80s live Grateful Dead. There's something there, and it must be authenticity, because these guys certainly couldn't play much more than basic rock scales. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say that is my approach. But like that whole, like what I said about not being a shredder, like I don't particularly have like formal training. I'm like mostly self-taught, and like my whole thing is just really just finding my own voice within the music, and like with what I can do, and which may be limited. And I feel like there's got to be like so many rock and roll bands that are like in the same boat, and it's in some ways it's kind of scrappy, and so I guess that's kind of my approach, is on some level is just like figuring out how to make it work.
How much of it has to do with the idea of you putting together a band that of people with completely different backgrounds? That's probably what made the Grateful Dead incredibly special. But I'm just curious about your bands. Like, do you want to bring it? I mean, if you're in a certain bag, like this sort of Kale, Waylon, country, music, are you looking to bring in, like some kind of rhythm section that's based in more, maybe world beat or jazz? I mean, do you think that is one in your bands? You bring in people that have completely different backgrounds in music.
Yeah, I mean, it's varied over the years with my stuff. When I first moved to New York, I was just kind of trying to put together session bands, people that I knew, because there's like a long history of quality playing in country music, like the Nashville studio scene, and and so I was like, oh well, I guess the best way to achieve what the sound I'm hearing, or like the sound I'm trying to create, that is like sort of this class, into playing with people that just really knew the country thing, like knew the feel, knew how to play that in that style and do it well. And I guess with this shred thing, we all strangely, me and Dan and Sam and Clay, we all kind of like gravitated towards the country thing.
Really? Go ahead.
Well, we all Sam and Clay do this like sort of this duo harmony thing, the Mapache thing, which is pretty heavily steeped in sort of like Everly Brothers and the Livin' Brothers, and like this sort of classic blood harmony sound, and Dan kind of has a background with his pedal steel playing and his sort of thing. He really likes the classic country shit too, and so I think that's kind of where we met. And as far as like other elements, like keys players or drummers and stuff that we've kind of found and brought in, it hasn't solely connected. It hasn't solely been the same thing, like how we're connecting on the country thing, but finding people who can, they like understand what we're going for, and we've gotten to play with a bunch of different people, and there's kind of been like a rotating cast in the sort of keys department for us too, and which is like strangely kind of like
exactly. That's exactly. We were talking because we were talking about this freaking. I was asking Healy. I said, how much work did you used to do on Brent's Midlands rigs? And he's like, not much. But then he went into this whole thing about this PhD. Literally took a Baldwin Grand, did the algorithms for every timbre and then created what became the Yamaha electric keyboard. And if you listen to 82 Brent Midland, his keyboard sounds exactly like an acoustic piano. It's ridiculous. But the point is, we were talking about it was the hot seat. I mean, nobody, there was not one non-tragic situation. Again, it's just funny, not that there are keyboard players that are losing their lives in Grateful Shred or whatnot, but it's like, why is the keyboard part so hard? Do you think that there's some validity in what Healy was saying? Not about Shred, I'm just talking about the Grateful Dead. What did you think about that comment?
Can you kind of re-break it down? He was just saying that,
I mean, I'm gonna basically. I asked him. I said, why? He said everybody has different theories as to why the keyboard part was the hot seat and why there wasn't a single non-tragic keyboard player. He says, for someone like Brent, who, truthfully, I mean, in talking to Mark Rodney from Batdorf and Rodney, Brent didn't really learn how to improvise until he got to be with them. But what he was saying was that, with Keith or other people, there's a certain amount of frustration in the pedanticness of 135, 157, 145 chord changes. And that, if you wanted to play something, a diminished chord, the band itself, it was over their heads. It was really, they were really dealing in major chords and open tunings. So he said to get into the minutia of what Errol Garner could get into, which is where maybe a keyboardist would have wanted to take it. It was over the band's head. I found it fascinating, and he's not the first person to say that. That doesn't take away anything from the communal vibe or the love or the spirit. I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, from listening to the Dead for a number of years, I don't think it was that would be accurate to say that was like over anyone's head in the band.
Right.
I think they were totally amazing, and they could do whatever they wanted, but they had a sound. Like they have a sound, and I don't know. I don't know that I totally agree.
I wonder. I mean, when I don't want to. I love Healy, and I just, to me, it does come across as sour grapes. But at the same time, I also talk to with the shred. I mean, I have to be honest. That help on. I mean, it's my. I love Slipknots. I mean, there's nothing I like more than that. But I mean, how do you feel about what you're doing with this group, in the sense that the feel is so good, and yet it sounds pretty damn polished, which is hard to do, because if it sounds polished to me, oftentimes I'm staring at the wall because there's no feel, but the feel is good. How have you been? I mean, what is the ingredient here that maybe I can't figure out, or I just haven't seen the band live, and how is it different from all these other bands? Because the feel is what's important. I mean, I could have played out that whole thing. Nobody was rushing anything. Nobody was rushing the solos, the harmonies, but it just felt good, man. It felt really good. How do you do? I mean, how does that? If you can verbally express that, how does that work?
I'm not sure. I think we're all just trying to connect on it. It's like this thing we all really like, and like music's like a thing we all really like, and I think we just kind of like bring what we got to the table with it, and I can't tell you exactly why it is that way, but I can say that like playing music with these guys is really fun, and we're trying to like find a place where we all feel like we're in the right pocket, and like, if it's trying to sing a certain way, or trying to like find the groove with the melody, and everyone's just kind of like trying to find the place where they exist in the band, and I guess that feel is kind of like where we meet at, and I can't exactly.
No, you're doing a great job. No, but
the formula is or anything. But.
Yeah, no, I mean it's cool. I mean it's like when with Garcia Band, when Melvin Seals came into the band, he wanted to listen to recordings of Merle playing with Jerry, and John and Jerry were like, no, I don't want you to listen to any of that stuff, because then you're going to play just like him. What did you guys do when you decided to sort of serendipitously got together and play? What kind of stuff did you listen to the Dead? Did you listen to certain eras of the Dead? Were there certain things that you focused on? You weren't. It wasn't like you. I mean, you were too young to even see the band. I never saw the band. How did you guys? Yeah. What did you focus on musically, insofar as that it would sound like yourselves and not just like the Grateful Dead?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, well, me, Sam Clay and I, like when we started kind of singing together, like we kind of connected on like the Old and the Way stuff, actually, which is like all like the vocal harmony stuff, and like the singing on all that stuff's so great. It's,
it's righteously sick. Sick.
It's incredible. It's like we kind of connected through through the kind of like bluegrass stuff, and then Dan came into the picture, and then it was like, oh cool, we got the bass, and then it kind of like went from like the Old and the Way thing to like being like, oh, you like everyone knew like all the Europe 72 shit. it's like oh sweet, like let's jam some of those songs, and then it's, you know, and it's just kind of been that. I think that kind of just like set it off in like a direction, and then we've kind of just tried to, you know, elaborate on that stuff, and you know, we're kind of like building on that material, and like adding in new stuff, and I don't, you know.
What kind of, I mean, you know, it's curious. I mean, can you talk about the 3-part harmony with you and Sam and Clay, and how you're incorporating new stuff? Because I even heard some new inflection stuff, even in that transition from Help on the Way to even when you come in. Maybe I just haven't listened to the early 70s in a long time. But can you talk about the 3-part harmony that you guys have? I feel like this is extremely important in modern music today, because you have cats at the pop level that are making so much money, and they're not even really good musicians. They say, the engineer says, you know, they're like, how did I sound? The engineer's like, terrible, we can fix it. You guys sound great.
Yeah, I don't know. I have like a pretty pretty long background in like singing music stuff, and then the country stuff and the folk stuff, and you know, like there's so much harmony music and all that stuff, you know, in all those different genres. And I think Sam and Clay kind of come from like a similar background where singing is kind of like the focus of the music they make, and we all like care about that a great deal. And I think we're like fortunate to like be able to do that together, and like be able to create like a harmony sound. And you know, like technically it kind of shifts around within the band a lot, but like from a technical standpoint, it's like we kind of got this dynamic where, you know, I mean, we all have our different ranges in which we like sing in, and Clay has this kind of like really nice like high voice, and Sam's kind of like, he has a nice high voice too, but he like floats around and does like a kind of baritone thing, which is kind of like where my vocal register sits most of the time. It's like I'm kind of a baritone, and so like I just think our voices kind of lend to each other well, and it's, I don't know, it's really fun to like work out harmony stuff, because we all really like that tradition of it. And
I mean, my friend who's a drummer saw you guys at the Brooklyn Bowl a couple weeks ago and was just blown away by just in general the sort of presence that you guys brought. I think he hadn't seen Dan. Dan was actually singing as well. Horn has a great voice, apparently. I mean, I didn't even know that, but you know, Horn was singing. And what do you feel?
Dan crushes.
I mean, it's, you know, I mean, and, you know, like, you know, and he's wearing his Brooks shoes and very comfy, cushiony shoes. Farmer Dave was talking about. He really studies Horn from afar, because he always keeps a cool head about him. But I mean, can you talk about? I mean, here's the thing. I mean, what my friend said. He goes, he's somehow Horn, because this stuff is not. It's so interesting, because Healy, in the same interview, he said that there were many guys in the band that did not want to have every other cat in their monitor mix, right? You know, like, you know, certain cats. I'm pretty convinced that it's quite possible that someone like Billy Kreutzmann did not want to have Phil in his monitor. He wanted just to stay with Bobby and Jerry to stay on, or at least with Bobby to stay on the one. But it's like, you know, do you find that, you know, yeah, I'm not even sure if if I have a question here. Here it is. Horn, does Horn somehow, you talked about Old and the Way before, and John Kahn is the most ridiculous bass player ever, and they didn't have a trap drummer. How does he make it so that it's like he's so in the pocket like Kahn, but yet it still sounds like Lesh? He's doing the hybrid thing.
I don't know, man. He's like Dan's the best, dude. That's like he's a very talented bass player, very talented musician, and he's got a great feel. And I think he listens. You know, I think that's I think that's a big part of it, is that he's I think kind of his background is like playing by ear is the whole thing, and so we're like doing the vocal thing, and so we're singing. It's all listening. It's like, and like Dan finds the right places to play and when not to play, and it's great.
Where did your ears grow the most on the bandstand? I mean, obviously he has huge ears, but so do you. So I mean, was there a time when some of the country stuff that you love? Formulaic might be the wrong word, but it certainly is not jam band music. You know, I'm curious about where your ears grew the most.
Well, I kind of started this. It wouldn't like technically be defined as bluegrass music, but I put together this like 5-piece string band, and it was sort of in between the time of like that I was living in New York and when I moved to LA. There was like a couple years there where I wasn't living in a city, and I found some buddies, and we put together this string band with some guys I knew in New York, and it was like a really heavy time for me. And I have this buddy Eric Smith, and we used to, you know, hang out around a campfire and like sing the Jerry Garcia songs and sing the Grateful Dead songs, and we really worked out a lot of that stuff. And I think that was like a really formative time for me, kind of like developing my ears with vocal harmony and stuff.
Did you play, like, did you at a certain point like come in with, you know, like most cats plugging in, and then you really wanted to get away from that and actually unplug and just play completely acoustic music?
Yeah, I guess that would be like a pretty fair assessment. I was playing a lot of electric country stuff in New York, and kind of moved to California and kind of got off the map a little bit, and was like living in a national park, and we would just have campfires every night. And so the electric thing wasn't like really even on the table at that point.
Yeah, right.
So it was kind of like a nice thing for me to like reconnect with acoustic music, which was like for me a big part of like why I got into writing songs or singing and stuff. So yeah, and that was like a really fun time for me musically.
Where do you see I mean, you guys have another tour coming up, and in fact, I will definitely I'm going to need you to get me on the guest list for the Vegas show. I'm going to be there, dude. Yeah. I'm going to Facebook Live this and blow that thing wide out. But
oh yeah, dude.
All right, but I mean, do you? I mean, not that a lot of maybe it's unspoken, but do you feel that this band will? Are you beholden to the songbook of the Dead, or do you believe that over time, or maybe that you're incorporating original stuff in as well? I mean, how do you see? You said you're incorporating new stuff. What is on the horizon? What is new?
Well, I mean, there's a mountain of music there. There's so many songs.
Insanity.
The Grateful Dead catalog. So I mean, like on some level, I think the potential there is like maybe not endless, but like there's just like a lot of amazing music there. So I really don't know about the whole incorporating original or anything like that. We do all kind of like play together in other variations of our projects, and it's, you know, our playing together is not limited to Grateful Shred, but this is a really fun project for us. So I would say I don't know about incorporating original music, but I'm not completely down on the idea of it.
I mean, like, I mean, do you feel like there are, I mean, are you playing like Lost Sailor Saint? I mean, have the tunes gotten, do you have I mean, cause there's just so much.
Yeah, it's kind, it's kind of like, yeah, it's like Lost Sailor Saint might be a little ways off, but you know.
I mean, that would. Why would explain to a layperson why that would be? Is it just because it would take a lot of time to work it out? Rehearsing.
Yeah, that's a really complex song, and it's a serious deep cut. It's like that's great, but yeah, like that would be. I think there would need to be like a certain circumstance to prompt stuff, and that's kind of like that's kind of how we've been playing it. It's like we're like going out to the East Coast, and we're like, oh, we should learn trucking.
right.
We should shed that one. It was like, and so that one's been like kind of a fun one for us to like start playing, and yeah, we're just kind of like we kind of take it like that. It's like certain situations prompt us to kind of like shed certain tunes, and if someone has one they really want to bring to the table and be like, oh, I really want to sing this one. And
I want to ask you, you mentioned Europe 72 before. Can you talk about a couple things here? Your drummer is still Mark Stepro?
We've kind of played with a few different drummers. Most recently, Richard Gowan's kind of been our.
Oh yeah, okay. That cat. I got to get to that. No, I want. So I'm asking because is it because you were kind of familiar with that era that you are going with a single drummer as opposed to double drums?
Yeah, well, we do double drums sometimes.
You do double drums.
It's just, yeah, not always. It's kind of been a thing where, depending on the show, like some shows are, like a lot of times it's a logistical thing. It's like, oh well, that club is. We're not going to be able to fit two drums on the
two
stage.
Kits on the stage. Yeah, I dig.
So it's kind of been this thing where it's like it's nice when we get to play bigger rooms and bring it out, and then we have a few different drummers we really like to play with, and Richard being one of them, and Mark has played with us a little bit. And I know Mark from New York. I've known him for a long time, and strangely, like Dan played with Mark also in bands before I knew Dan.
Really?
And
what that's insane. This is all 6 degrees of separation.
I think it was like more some kind of like pop gigs and stuff like that. But that was like years ago, and so it was like we both knew Mark, so it was like, oh, let's get Mark in for some stuff. And there's this other guy, Austin Beatty, we play with sometimes, and this next run on the West Coast is going to be with this drummer Josh Adams, and so it's kind of, we've kind of like been able to incorporate the double drum thing sometimes. So,
wait, hold on, I want to just ask you. So, I'm just kind of half joking, but it's like based on the room, do you roll with 2 drummers, and then if the room suits it, that second drummer can suit up for the night, or normally it'll just be one drummer, or you just go with one drummer?
I mean, sometimes we just go with one drummer regardless. Like obviously, this like East Coast tour we did was just Richard, and yeah, mostly the double drums thing has been like hometown gigs or stuff around Southern California.
Right. I'm just saying, like the Vegas show, will it be double drums or maybe just Adams on drums?
It's just going to be Adams on drums.
So how did the idea, in speaking to Papa Molly and other cats too, I mean, he said that Billy Kreutzmann liberated him like no other other musician. This is well into his career, because he said that even Barry Sless would turn around at these David Nelson gigs and look at Billy and say, where's one? Where's the one? George Porter has to do that too with Billy. And Billy would, after the set was over, he said, the concept is that any note can be the one, and the downbeat. And, the Dead were predicated on losing the one and then masterfully weaving their way back so that they all came back in on the one. And that's really the most spiritual part of their music. And did you have experiences in a collective before Shred to lose the one? And I also wonder, why do you... It's interesting because, if you're going to rotate one position, the drumming position is one of the most tedious that you could rotate. Why do you keep rotating drum? Why do you like to have different feels? And how did you get comfortable with the concept that any note can be the one?
Yeah, well, part of it has been, like a lot of the drummers we've played with, or the several that we've played with. It's like logistics. It's like who's available in some ways, and
Dig.
And all these cats are really heavy players, and so like and sometimes sometimes it's like we choose a drummer for we're like oh well, let's do it, it would be good for the gig, but then like I said, in some ways it's like oh, like Richard's around or Austin's around, and everyone's, all these drummers are stoked on the music, so it's like so it's cool to like mix it up. But yeah, like this, for me, this is the first project I would say where it's a full-on thing to kind of like lose the one and return like on that sort of thing, and which is a cool experience. It's like there's all this like breathing space, and everyone's kind of like exploring together in this thing, and then when you get to find it again, it's like it can be like, I don't know, like I think it's a really fun experience. It feels really special or something. And
who do you find yourself so interesting? Did you just sort of have to get up there and fall down and make mistakes and figure it? How did you get comfortable? It can be very disconcerting. Who are you listening to the most? That was when I interviewed Oteil Burbridge, and he was shedding for the Dead and Company. He said, when I was listening back to tapes, it was interesting because I didn't pick up on this originally, but Bobby was keeping the one. And that's who and Oteil's definitely not Phil Lesh. He's completely different bass player. But who are you listening to the most in order to not get lost in that space?
Yeah, I think like I think a lot of times it's like Dan who's like kind of like has his finger the most on that pulse, and I'm listening to him a lot, and the role kind of, I feel like it trades off a lot too, though. I think the guitars go a certain direction, and someone's kind of leading the pack, and then sometimes that can like change within the jam like a couple times or a few times, and then but I think as far as like the pulse is concerned, I'm really listening to Dan a lot.
I got to tell you, I just, it's funny, I'm going to interview Albert Tootie Heath, one of the Heath brothers in Santa Fe, and then I'm going to drive to the Vinyl at Hard Rock Hotel in Vegas to see Grateful Shred on August 10th, dude. So I cannot wait to hang, man. It is, we are going to have a ball. This thing's, it's going to be out of control, man.
Yeah, dude, looking forward to that one. It's
going
to be fun.
And just, so let's stay in touch, man. It was really great to connect with you, man, and we'll do more and keep it happening, dude. You guys sound great, and you guys have a serious responsibility, not just with the lineage of the Grateful Dead, but with all your other projects. You have even at a young age, you have actually huge responsibility to lead my daughters and future generations in their understanding of how real music is made, because there's a lack of authenticity in a lot of music today, pop music especially, and it's very dangerous for culture and society. So, don't go off the grid anytime soon. We need cats like you, man.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, man. Thanks for the kind words and stuff.
Yeah, we'll do it again. I'll see you. I'll see you in less than a week, dude.
Sounds great.
All right, man.
Looking
Later.
forward to it.
Yeah.
Later, Jake.
Peace. Austin McCutchen, part of the configuration known as Grateful Shred. We are 2/3 of the way through the Jake Feinberg show today, and coming up live from France, we are going to be joined by Gumiso Musendo in just a few minutes. Everybody hang loose.